Welcome to Blue Sky Automotive. Our goal is to finish up this head job on this 2001 Ford F250. In this video, we're going to be putting the intake back on, the fuel rail all back on, belts, pulleys, connectors, all that kind of stuff. And we'll go back on in this video. And then the final video will be putting all the front end on, the radiator, filling all the fluids back up, doing an oil change, and firing it up. And hopefully we did it all right, and it's going to sound great and run good for thousands of miles to come. All right, well, let's get started. Intake. Real quick before we put the intake back on, I went to put the oil dipstick tube back in, and I can't because this EGR tube is in the way. We took the exhaust manifold off first, then the tube came out. When we put the head back on, we bolted the manifold to the head, put it on, and then now the dipstick tube does not go back in. So, a tip, hopefully you're watching all these before you do anything, because the tip would be is while the exhaust is off, crack that EGR bolt loose on the manifold and just take it off. Then put the EGR tube back on after. So that would be the tip. So I'm gonna try to break it loose. I have heat and all that, and I'm gonna try to break it loose to pull it off. If I can't, then pulling the manifold back off is what will have to happen. So I'm hoping to avoid that step, but if needed, that's what we'll have to do to get that oil tube back in. So kind of a bummer, but all right, got the tube back in. I ended up taking the exhaust off. We put all new studs in the head and their new bolts, so you know, that was pretty easy just to pull off, put back on. It gave me the most room to wiggle that thing back in its little home. So that's what we did. Okay, now let's put the intake on. So we have the new intake gaskets on. They only go one way. They lock into their little holes. Took out the paper towels and this connector right here. We're gonna leave that draped out the front because it connects to our main harness. All right, let's put this intake on. So for the injector O-Rings, we want to go ahead and take a little silicone paste, little lube around the O-ring, and then maybe just a little in the hole as well. That way it goes in nice and smooth and we're not accidentally ripping any O-rings. All right, so this is the intake manifold tightening sequence. Stage 1, 18 inch-pounds. Stage 2, 18 foot-pounds. All right, our intake is all torqued down. I did put in a new thermostat. Now would be a good time, since that's, you know, already apart. At this point, we're just gonna put in all the coils, and then the electrical will get sloughed back over, plugged back in, all the hoses and stuff that will get plugged back in next. So that'll all be time-lapsed. Alright, so we got the whole top put back together, all the connectors, hoses. I still need to put that clamp down, but it's all complete. Just a note about routing. You can take pictures of both sides before. I did not. What you don't want are things to be chafing, rubbing, so just, you know, be aware of that. And if you go to plug it in or connect it and it doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right. So just find the nicest path for all your electrical and hoses and things like that. The vacuum hose only goes on one way. I took mine completely out. You can put it back in. If you forget, you're like, oh no, that's okay. It can go in even like this, so no big deal. The harness on this side, I had it up and over the EGR. And I was like, oh no, I can't get it back through because there wasn't enough space. Well, you could take this plastic, I don't know, retainer. You can untape it. I just cut the tape, pull it out of here, and then separate this plastic piece, and then this loom is you know, small enough and bendable enough to get it around. So that was ended up being no big deal. Snapped it back in, taped it back up, and you're good to go. All right, so now let's work on the front. The only thing I did was it was getting a new power steering pump. It's not tight. I just have it threaded in there a few so I can get the hoses. We got brand new hoses as well for the power steering. So now let's get all this stuff back on. I'll give you torque specs of everything, and then it'll just be fast forward back on. All right, first off, for the idler, it is 18 foot-pounds. And then down for the crank, it's a series, tightened to 66 foot-pounds, and then back it out 360 degrees or one full turn. Tighten it again to 37 foot-pounds, and then an additional 90. And that'll be setting the crank pulley. Power steering, or the water pump, I mean, is 18 foot-pounds. Power steering pump, even though there's 4 bolt holes on the pump, 1 is not used, only 3 bolt holes are used. So have no fear. 19 foot-pounds for that. Belt tensioner is 18 foot-pounds. Right, on our crank pulley, this little keyway, we want to clean that out really good, get any of the old RTV out. And then we're going to put a little bit about in the middle, roughly, another little blob of RTV. On the back side, we want to clean that off really good, and then we'll put a little lubricant on it so as it slides in, it doesn't damage our new seal that we put in. is crazy. So I'm in the van, so I can talk. So up to this point, getting all the front pulleys and stuff on, pretty easy. You just torquing things down. The crank was the only thing that had multiple steps. So I used my impact and sucked the crank in all the way, and then you can feel it bottom out. The tension on the gun and everything will change, and you feel it bottom out. So then I backed it out. So that's what I did for step number 1. Step number 2, I did like normal. So I torqued it. I forget the torque is like 37 foot-pounds, and then it wants you to go an additional 90. So I did 37 foot-pounds, and then on the bolt head, I marked just kind of how I did the head bolts. So I marked it, and then now I know where the 90 will be from the beginning. But I use an impact to get my 90. Is that kosher? I don't know. But that's what I used on this. And then that got my 90, so the crank was done. Don't forget the crank sensor plug, otherwise it won't start. So this is going to end this video. In the next video, I'm going to put the radiator on, transmission lines on the radiator, bolt up the exhaust, still needs to be bolted up, and then we're going to crank it over. That'll be in the next video. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, post down below. I'd be happy to answer anything I know. All right. We'll see you on the next one.